Please welcome veteran DynamicsCon superheroes Kristen Hosman and Shannon Mullins. Today they'll be showcasing premiering content in their session, Top Misconfigurations in Business Central. Please stick around after Kristen and Shannon's session for a live Q&A.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Top Misconfigurations in Business Central. I'm Kristen Hosman here with the lovely Shannon Mullins. And before we get kicked off, I just wanted to give a big shout out to the community for voting this session in. Thank you for allowing us to share our knowledge and to better the community with that knowledge. Anything that you see today is going to be recorded and put on the YouTube channel for later viewing, so don't feel like you need to keep notes. Also, just a reminder that Shannon and I will be watching the chat during our session, and we will be doing a live Q&A at the end. We look forward to talking with you, and also we look forward to seeing you at DynamicsCon Live in May of 2023. I'm Kristen Hosman, and I live near Denver, Colorado. I'm a Microsoft MVP for business applications, specializing in Business Central. Fun fact, there's only around 38 Business Central MVPs worldwide today. I also am an advisory committee member for Dynamics User Group, also known as DUG.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Mullins. I live outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Also a Microsoft MVP of Business Applications, and I am on the Dynamics Minds Board Advisor. So that's a first European user conference that unfortunately conflicts with DUG this year. But I'm sure everybody at DUG will have a great time in Scottsdale this year. And we'll look forward to seeing Kristen and the team presenting there. I'm the CEO of BC Consulting Group and really excited to present to you today on Business Central.
So let's first cover why we're here. So Shannon and I have been in the industry for a very long time, and we've been implementing and supporting Business Central now for several years. So we put together this session to help the community just to understand what are the top misconfigurations that we've seen within the system. Let's kick it off with incorrect security. So we all know that incorrect user permissions can lead to data security issues and restrict access to important business information. Keep in mind that Business Central ships out of the box from Microsoft with several permission sets and also user groups already predefined. These may be great for the smaller businesses who don't want to put a lot of focus on security, but for the bigger organizations that are implementing Business Central, they have a lot of restrictions that need to be happening on the security side. So one of the tips here that I have is keep in mind that you can limit access by a company level, by module level, table level, different things like that. And then also when you're making custom permission sets, use the record permission sets tool to just help you along the way and make it a little bit easier. Notification recipients. This is something that's done in your admin portal. And this is important so that people get notified whenever there's an update coming to Business Central. Maybe there's an issue with your tenant, different things like that. But making sure that your notification recipients is always up to date is going to keep your organization in the know when Microsoft is sending out those notifications. Also, your partner should be in this notification window as well, so that they're getting notifications and you guys are both keeping up to date. Bank account linking. We all know how awesome this feature is within the system. It allows you to link your bank account so that you can grab transactions from your bank account that may help you with payment processing, the payment processing journal, or even a bank reconciliation. One of my tips here is going to be seeing if your bank allows you to set up another user, maybe specifically a BC user that you can use, and use that login for Business Central. I've gotten a lot of support tickets along the way where the linking just stops working, and it's because someone's left the company and they were the ones who had it linked. So by having a dedicated Business Central user will fix that issue. And then also just making sure that you have the password expiration turned on with your bank. Anytime your password is updated on the bank side, you can expect that you're going to have to update that login on the Business Central side as well. Extension management. Don't install new extensions into the production environment, and also don't install updated extensions without testing in Sandbox first. So I actually have a story here of this where I was working for a partner. We had a client ready to go live on Monday. We come into the office on Monday, we have our meeting, and the client tells me that something's changed in the system since Friday. So something had changed over the weekend in the system. And when we started digging into what had changed, we found out that one of the managers had gone out to the extension marketplace and was looking for an expense reports tool. They had installed that in Business Central production, not knowing what it was going to do. And of course, it kind of wreaked havoc on our system, and it created additional fields within tables that we didn't need. And it also created issues with the users processing transactions. So we ended up having to postpone go live because of that. So make sure that you're always in a sandbox. And then last but not least, make sure that you're not installing extensions from non-trusted sources. And this also includes the extension marketplace. Make sure that you are vetting out the company that put it out there, published it. Make sure that you're reading reviews, talking with folks in the community, because you could be downloading something that is going to cause a lot of issues if you don't vet it out. Shannon, I'm sure you have a story on that one. I'm just going to kind of throw it over to you, because this is a big issue, I think, with misconfigurations, is these extensions. Do you have a story for us?
Yeah, I know a lot of people call me and they're like, I don't know if my issues are because of an extension or it's because of the base app. So a lot of times I'll tell people, like, one of your sandboxes, you can just use that for app testing, right? And you can install an app, or you can also uninstall extensions. So if you've got an extension, your partner created an extension, your development team created one, and you're like, is this the problem or is it base app? What you can do is you can actually uninstall extensions from your environment, obviously in Sandbox, one by one, and do some testing. And then another good tip and trick is, like, just to know that when you uninstall it, the tables stay there. So if for some reason you have to uninstall and reinstall an extension, it's not going to break your VC because the tables are there. So a lot of people are like freaked out, like, oh my gosh, I got to install this, reinstall it. But also, I just want to also mention, like, it's very important to update your extensions, because extensions don't upgrade automatically. So make sure you're testing out new extension versions. Make sure you subscribe to any ISVs or apps you have and, like, get their release notes, test their extensions, and then make sure that you guys plan those upgrades as well. So you need an upgrade schedule for your ISVs. It's very easy to update them in the admin center. However, you have to do the updates. So a lot of times we'll put in cases for admin center, and the ISVs will come back and say, well, you're not on the latest version, and no one, went in and did those versions. So make sure you're testing all of that. Again, like Kristen said, don't install anything that your partner doesn't recommend or that they haven't vetted out. There's 4,000 apps out there now, or close to, and a lot of them are new. So you need to make sure that you understand what it does and how it's going to affect your users before you roll it into production.
Perfect. Thanks, Shannon. And kind of just elaborating on that. So you are allowed one production environment and also up to 3 sandbox environments. You can pay for extra if you need it, but this is just standard kind of licensing here. We also always tell folks that you're updating your sandbox on a maybe quarterly, half of the year, yearly, or something like that. But always having a quote unquote current sandbox is going to allow your users someplace else to go other than production to test out processes, and also to test out different extensions that may be of our interest to them. Field monitoring setup and change log setup. So I see this quite frequently when I have new clients come to me for support. They've either been implemented by another partner, or they've read a blog online and they, interpreted it a certain way. But the tip here is that select your most important tables or fields when it comes to change log setup or field monitoring. And then also monitor your retention policy. You don't want this stuff to be saved out there until the end of time. Maybe you want it to be deleted in 30 days, 45 days, something like that. But I actually have a story here that I'll share. I had a client come to me for support. They said that they weren't sure why their storage was going up really, really fast. They were seeing, in the admin center that they were using a lot of storage, but they were a very small company. And what we found out is that someone went in and turned on changelog tracking for multiple tables, and not only multiple tables, but they did it for every single field on the table. So they were logging anytime something was inserted into that table, modified, deleted for every single field. And it just caused a lot of space to be used up. And they didn't have a retention policy on there either. So you can imagine every time they would take their production company and copy it over to a Sandbox, now you're using twice the space, right? Than just having that one company out there. So that's just a tip on that one. The next one is incorrect posting group configuration. So, accounting, making sure everything goes in the right buckets, that's where this one comes into play. So incorrect mapping of the accounts can cause problems with financial reporting and also tax compliance. Try to make the posting groups as simple as possible. I've seen upwards of 50 to 60 unique general business posting groups, and it's not easy to manage at all. And the reason that client needed that many is because they had a unique income account for different item types or different item categories. So instead of using dimensions for that, they had unique account numbers. So that's how many, general product posting groups that they had to set up and maintain. That specific client also had the inventory posting group showing that the inventory items needed to go to inventory account, but on the business, general business posting groups, product posting groups, they actually had it incorrect in there, and cost of goods sold was hitting the inventory account. It wasn't actually hitting cost of goods sold account. So at the end of the month, they were reconciling out everything in this inventory account, and they were wondering why it was always off. And it's because the business product posting groups were set up incorrectly. So this is one of those things to keep in mind when you're setting up Business Central, is you really want to take the time to understand all of these posting groups, what each one of the categories or titles are for the accounts, and making sure that you're testing it to make sure that the scenarios are going to the right accounts that you want them to go to. If you do go and update a posting group with an account number, it's not going to go and update anything that has been posted. It's only going to correct anything in the future that needs to be posted. So that's just another tip there as well. Incorrect inventory setup. So the biggest one that I see here is going to be costing methods are incorrect. So if the costing method is incorrect, then we're going to have, wrong cost of goods sold amounts, wrong inventory valuations. That's going to lead to a lot of issues, with reporting or tax reporting, things like that. The recommended fix, if you've already transacted on an item, is to do an inventory adjustment to take everything out of inventory and then create a new item and then move the inventory in there. That's a lot of work. There is another workaround as well that your partner can assist with. But if you're transacting in the system today and your costing method is incorrect, it could cost you hours of work just to get it fixed. So this is just another one of those things. Make sure when you're implementing Business Central that someone is paying special attention to the costing methods on those inventory items to make sure that they're correct. The chart of accounts is the core of the financials. It's also used to group income and expenses in the income statement and balance sheets. It's very important that you have your account types correct for year end when you go to close the income statement, because all of those accounts that are set up as a income statement account are going to close to retained earnings. I actually had a support case come in last month on this where a client closed the income statement And they opened a support case because the amount that hit retained earnings was not correct. So they opened a support case. As we started digging into this, we found out that a new user had set up a new chart of accounts account number, and they had picked the wrong account type. So they had an income statement account set up as a balance sheet account. So when they went to close the income statement, that year-end expense amount never closed to retained earnings. Again, this just causes a lot of extra work at year-end that nobody wants at year-end. So making sure that you're monitoring things like that, either throughout the year or right before you close the income statement, is my recommendation. The next thing here is dimensions. So I talked a little bit earlier about how I had a client that had between 50 and 60 different general product posting groups set up because they had that many unique income accounts. If they were using dimensions, that would clean that up and it would shorten that list up quite a bit. Dimensions are used in the system to categorize entries so that you can track and analyze them. They can, for example, indicate maybe a project or a department from where the entry came from. So instead of setting up separate general ledger accounts for department and project, you can use dimensions as a basis for analysis to avoid having to create a complicated chart of accounts. Think of possibly payroll entry. You wouldn't want to have to set up an account number for salaries, admin salaries, marketing salaries, sales. You would just set up salaries as an account number, and then you would set up a dimension called department and code it that way as well. You're allowed 2 global dimensions. These are going to be used as filters, for example, on reports, batch jobs, XML ports. Again, you can only use 2 global dimensions, so choose which ones you're going to be using the most often. Shortcut dimensions are available as well as fields on journals, document lines, and general entries. Dimension set is a unique combination of a dimension value. They're stored as dimension set entries in the database. Each dimension set entry represents a single dimension value. In addition, each dimension set entry within it is identified by a common dimension set ID. Dimensions are going to be useful again for reporting. The last thing that I just want to mention on here is on analysis views. They're going to be used to create customized views of business data that enable users to analyze and understand data from different perspectives. And I actually have an example on this that goes into why dimensions are one of the biggest misconfiguration items in Business Central. I had a client come to me strictly for support. They had been implemented by another partner. And the reason they came to me is because their partner kept telling them that they couldn't build a certain report. In the report, they showed it to us. Right away, I knew it could be built if dimensions were set up correctly and we used analysis views. So I got digging in their system, and what I found was that their previous partner who had done the implementation, who clearly didn't really understand dimensions and how they needed to be set up, they set up their 2 most used dimensions as shortcut 3, shortcut 4, instead of putting them in there as dimension 1, dimension 2. Okay, so that was problem number 1. The other problem that I noticed is in the general journal line, the partner had created a PTE, a per tenant extension. So they had a customization in there to show shortcut 3 and shortcut 4 dimensions on the general journal. Now, we all know that if it's set up correctly, you don't need a PTE for these to show throughout the system. You just need to personalize your window. So that was indication number 2, that their implementation partner didn't really understand how to configure the system when it came to dimensions. What we ended up doing is we ended up uninstalling the customization that they did, and we also fixed their dimensions so that they had the 2 that needed to be global 1, global 2 set up correctly. And then we were using shortcut 3 and shortcut 4 as well. We were able then to take analysis views and configure that in such a way that we were able to build out an income statement with everything that they wanted. So we now had a happy client, but also from a consultant point of view, I was pretty kind of sad and a little maybe irritated that it was configured incorrectly, because for me, I thought that was a pretty straightforward configuration, but clearly it wasn't. So that one made the list. The next one is on currencies. So if you're a company that operates in more than one country or region, it's going to become essential that you are able to trade and report financial information in more than one currency. Okay, so if the currency is not set up correctly, it's obviously going to cause issues with financial reporting and transactions. The local currency, LCY, is defined in the general ledger setup page. Once the local currency has been defined, it will be represented as a blank currency throughout the system. So anytime you open maybe a customer card, a vendor card, a bank card, and there's that currency, that LCY in there, as long as it's blank, that means it's defaulting to your local currency that was set up in your general ledger setup window, okay? If you have multi-currencies, there's some additional setup that needs to happen too. So at that point, you must set up currency codes for each currency that you use if you buy or sell in currencies other than your local currency. Also, bank accounts can be created using currencies. It is possible to record GL transactions in different currencies. However, the GL transaction will always be posted in the local currency. Do not create the local currency both in the general ledger setup and in the currencies page. It's going to cause confusion between the bank currency and the local currency code in the currency table. In return, then, you may accidentally be created with some of the wrong currency codes, either on bank accounts, customers, vendors, etc. The next one on the list is going to be workflows. So improperly configured workflows are going to cause issues with critical processes that are being reviewed and or approved by individuals. Okay, so if they're not configured correctly, things may get approved when they shouldn't have. Maybe they're going further into the process than they need to, etc. So this is also going to include any workflows that are created through Power Automate. Just make sure that they're well built and vetted out. Incorrect integrations with other systems can result in data duplication and or data loss. For example, integrations with other systems such as payment gateways or other software must be properly configured to ensure accurate data transfer and prevent errors. I actually have an example for you guys on this one. I have a client that utilizes a third-party solution for all of their reoccurring billing. And the only thing that they want coming into Business Central at the end of the month is going to be a sales invoice. They're actually using another solution to make that integration happen. But you can imagine 20 different companies, they have to have 20 different integrations, one for each company. Maintaining those and keeping them all the same is a very manual process today. So for them, if they go in and update one, they need to make sure to go and update the other 19 with that change. They recently contacted me and said, hey, we noticed that our sales invoice numbers are no longer, coming over correctly into Business Central. And when we got down into it, they had, someone had modified the integration just slightly, and it caused an issue with some fields, not all, but some fields, even more fields than the invoice number that they didn't even notice. So just making sure that not just anybody has access to these integrations and these mapping fields is going to be key as well. Poorly designed reports that are incorrect, obviously, are going to cause inaccurate data, causing confusion or even mistrust in the system. So, when you're implementing Business Central, this is one of the tools that we reporting is one of the tools that we utilize to make sure that your GL history matches your legacy system. But if you create new accounts throughout Business Central and they have transactions in there, and nobody is going in and modifying the reports to add those account numbers in there, obviously there's going to be incorrect information displayed on those reports. Another example that just recently happened for me is we have a client coming off of QuickBooks and they wanted to use the migration tool, which is great. When we migrated their chart of accounts over, we noticed right away that it was like someone took a bucket of account numbers and just threw them in the air. You know, you had income statement accounts that were up in the assets and liabilities, and then you had some asset account numbers that were down in the income statement. So making sure that your chart of accounts is in a correct order as well is going to make reporting a lot easier and obviously less confusion then as well.
Okay, great job, Kristen, on all those topics. Next, we're going to start with my one of my favorite topics. I do a lot of international tax setup projects where people don't set up sales tax correctly. So VAT tax, sales tax, GST, whatever your tax is. You have to maintain the taxes inside BC. So a lot of people ask me the question, like, will BC just know what my taxes are? Absolutely not. That's not the case. So sales tax setup, very, very important. You can use tax setup to do use tax. So a lot of companies don't know this, but you can actually use it to do use tax too. So maybe you don't charge sales tax. You can use it to do sales use tax for your states. And a lot of states will ask you to actually record that, and you can use BC to do that rather than Excel. But setting it up inside BC is very manual. If any rate changes, products change, whatever the taxability changes, you do have to go up and update your tables. If you are doing a lot of B2C, so you're selling a lot to consumer, and you need to maintain this, I highly recommend moving to a third party. We're an Avalara Gold partner. I've been working with Avalara for 12 years. Avalara will tell you what your tax rate is without you having to maintain it, keep it up, know what to do. We'll also tell you when you have Nexus. So the problem with BC is it will not tell you if you have Nexus in a new state. So maybe you're doing tax in New York, and that's where you reside, and you start shipping to California. You may have automatic Nexus in California and automatically have to register with the state of California. BC is not going to tell you that. So keep in mind when you're setting up sales tax, it is a very manual process. Make sure your partner understands tax in your jurisdiction or your locality, because US tax is obviously very different from VAT and GST, and just make sure you have a partner that understands how tax needs to be set up. Item categories versus dimensions. So this is a pretty important one for people when they're determining how they're going to do reporting. So I always tell people you can always grab sales, inventory, item ledger entry history from item categories. And when should you use those versus dimensions? So dimensions, I usually tell people we're going to use dimensions when we need financial based reporting. So think P&L by department, by P&L by product category. Well, if you run your P&Ls by product category, you should probably have product category as a dimension. So how is that different from item categories? Well, I like to think of item categories as like little groups on how you're going to put your items. So for instance, in our slide here, we have coffee makers, and we have two different types of coffee makers. We have commercial and we have consumer. So this is a way that we can kind of group together and see where our items fall. And we can do reporting off of that. But if we don't need to do financial reporting off of consumer model coffee makers, we do not need that as a dimension. We can just set that up as an item category. So as you're setting it up, it's important to think about how you're going to do the reporting. Is it just item-based reporting, sales-based reporting, purchase reporting? You probably don't need it as a dimension because you can use those item categories. But if you're going to be doing financial reporting, that's where I tell everybody we're going to be using it as a dimension. So make sure you're not duplicating your efforts here and using it for something where you don't need to do it twice. Next up is improper warehouse setup. So setting up your warehouse is very important. It's good to have a partner who knows how warehousing works. It's important to make sure you choose the right settings, or things are going to really bottleneck in your warehouse. I usually tell people if you're a simple shop, you don't have a lot of diligence on your shop floor, people are not trained properly, start off really, really simple. Some of the basic things can cause real big bottlenecks out in your system. Obviously require receive, always important, like you want people to receive. Now, if you don't have a warehouse that's receiving and you're just going to do receipts on the invoices and post them for purchasing, maybe you don't want to turn that on. Requiring putaways, again, that requires diligence. That requires a put away list where people have to go and see what they have to put away and it tells them where to put it away. Make sure you have the processes down before you start adding your warehouse setup to the configuration. So you can turn things on later. Again, this is something that you always want to test in Sandbox. Make sure you are not doing warehouse changes in production without testing it out, or you can cause a huge shop floor bottleneck. Azure Security and MFA. So I see a lot of customers who do not have these two things configured. And what do both of them do? So Azure Security, very new to BC. Microsoft is adding a whole bunch of new security features, but this is a really important one. Not only is it a login to Office and Outlook using your email to access BC, you can add an additional layer saying that you have to be in an Azure security group to even access the URL. And this will help prevent users from hacking your account and then trying to mimic it and not being part of that Azure security group. So you could set up an accounting group or an ERP group in Azure, assign that environment to that security group. And not only will they have to log in with their email, they also will have to be part of the Azure security group to access Business Central. So an additional layer of security. MFA, hugely important. Make sure that your users, because they're accessing your financial data, they are required to put a prompt or a PIN in order to access BC. You do not want hackers just sitting there attacking your Microsoft tenant, getting in and having access to not only email, but also to Business Central where your financial data lies. So make sure you set that up. Also coming soon, Microsoft is going to be granting, I don't know what version it's going to be finally released in, but they are talking about limiting BC access per IP address, meaning you can whitelist IP addresses and anything outside that would not be able to access BC. Again, making sure people who aren't on devices that have someone's password can't just get into BC, they would have to be on a specific device. So some huge security features that you need to take advantage of. Financial reporting. Most users don't know how to modify financial reports in BC. So I've had users call me and they're like, my cash flow doesn't work, my P&L doesn't work, my balance sheet doesn't work, or they just have one and they're like, I need multiple ones, but instead of doing it in BC, they're doing it in Excel. You can have multiple financial statement formats, but teach your users, train your users how to modify the reports. Like Kristen mentioned earlier, if you add a new account, someone needs to go modify it. If you need a different version of the report, someone needs to go create it. So make sure that you know how to customize and create your financial reports. Get some good training on this area. Limitations in how many you can run at one time. So obviously you can run BC with different dimensions. You can slice and dice it. I feel like it doesn't have the full capabilities that some of the third parties have, where you can run a whole workbook at once, a ton of reports at once. I like to use third parties. I like to use Cosmos reports. Great for that. There's some more advanced things like adaptive, but if you have very complex distribution rules, budgeting rules, forecasting rules, that's usually where you're going to look at those ISV products. So don't think you're limited to just BC. There's a lot of different ISVs for that as well. Email misconfigurations. So when you go to set up email inside BC and you want to email for the first time, it will ask you to set up email. And typically it's asking you to set up the current user. Well, the problem is when you go to email out your, customer statements, your invoices, your purchase orders, it's going to have that current user, right? What if you wanted to say purchasing at abccgroup.com, or what if you wanted it to say accounting or something similar? You need to make sure that you have different document sending profiles. So there's actually a place in BC called document sending profiles where you can set up different documents to use different emails, different reply tos, different subjects, things like that, so that the email looks really professional. It's going through the correct outbox, and you can see that. You can also view sent emails per profile inside BC. So I don't know if a lot of people know this. You don't have to just go to Outlook to see those sent emails. Under the profiles, or as an admin, you can see all the emails that are being sent out with the user, which is really nice. So take advantage of that. Document layouts. The BC out of the box layouts are just trash. I'm just going to say it right now. They look horrible. Kristen can probably agree or disagree with me, but they look absolutely terrible. So number one, make sure you clean those up, make them look pretty, have your partner do it or learn how to do it and get better looking document layouts. But one thing people don't know, you can have multiple document layouts. So you can have multiple document layout types and you can assign those to the customer. So on the customer card, there's a place where you can assign different document layouts per document type. And so maybe you were running 3 different organizations in one, or you need a different logo or a different format per customer, you can do that, which is really great. So don't have to customize one giant form to meet everyone's needs. You can have a layout just for that specific customer, which is really great. And my third part is the out of the box document layouts are trash. So make sure you clean those up. You don't want those ugly looking ones. Integration with Dynamics 365 for sales CRM. So there is a built-in integration. A lot of people go to Salesforce or HubSpot or some other CRM because they don't know that BC has this capability. I use both products. I love it. Every time I add a contact in CRM, it's synced into accounting. Every time I add the account in BC, it syncs back up to CRM, vice versa. We're sharing items, we're sharing item availability, a lot of different syncs between the two. It also has drill back from D365 into BC and vice versa. So you can kind of couple records and see them in both systems. A couple limitations, it cannot do custom mapping. So if you have custom entities, custom fields on your entities inside a CRM, you cannot map to them, vice versa inside of BC. And so we use Power Automate to do that. You can use the Power Automate Dataverse connector and do a custom integration between the two. Not too difficult to do if you have the right people involved. You cannot map those custom entities. So think about it when you're developing your CRM. Can it integrate to BC? Does it need to integrate to BC? And then where in BC is that data going to live? Because potentially you might need an extension inside BC to handle those fields as well. So keep that in mind. BOM configuration. Many users don't configure their BOMs correctly. So including indirect costs into your BOM. So a lot of people will put both the indirect costs into the BOM lines and then add an indirect percentage, throwing their BOM cost off. Make sure that you're setting this up correctly. So if you're going to do a percentage of your direct materials, then you probably just want to put that in the indirect percentage and not list those out in the BOM. I always tell people back flush when possible. If you're not going to be manually flushing or manually consuming, back flushing will save you. You don't want to have to tell the system every single time to go pick and put those goods into the system. You can actually back flush them. If you want to know the exact count, lot, serial going into the BOM, what exactly went into that production order, make sure you enable picks for your warehouse location. So people have to go out and pick those goods, assign them, and then the system will flush those out. Very important to do that. Know that you can have different variations of a BOM. You don't have to just have one. So sometimes you have some variants and you can create those variations of BOMs and you can update those as you create those production orders. So that's very important as well. Manual warehouse processes versus scanners. I've seen so many companies doing manual warehouse processes inside Business Central. So time consuming. I don't know if I can do warehousing in BC anymore because 2 to 4 manual transactions to process one transaction, it's too much. User adaptability, it's very low when you have to do a lot of manual things. As a user, nobody likes that. Using third parties makes it so much easier. My favorite, InsightWorks. You can do every warehouse function with one scan. You don't have to do all the manual pieces. And you can process scanners at either the item level or at the license plate level. A lot of people call them skids, pallets, whatever you like to call them. You can process those with the barcode scanner. And all these third parties read back to BC and post the transaction, so you don't have to do the work. It's a no-brainer. Make sure you're not deploying your manual processes inside BC. So a lot of people coming to BC or that have moved from NAV or GP, they take their system just as it is and they dump it inside BC, including all of their manual processes. So really good to do an evaluation of your current system, your current processes, and say, hey, where can we improve this? Where can we create a better flow inside the system? And then use things like Power Automate, Power Apps, Teams, Microsoft Forms to automate those manual processes? Why do something that you did before inside of BC? I have a good example. I had a customer who they wanted to move over to BC. They were keying purchase orders into BC after, well, this is with a prior partner, but after entering them into another system that they were using for procurement. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we could automate that with Power Automate. Those would automatically come in, and the user was like, oh wow, that's awesome. So find out what you're doing that's manual, see where you can automate it. No one should have to key data into one system into another. It's just so important. And Kristen, I'm sure you can attest to this. Like, people love manual processes because it's job security, but why do it when you have all these capabilities at hand?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, I have a prospect right now on NAV 2014 R2, and you can imagine the limitations that existed in that version that long ago. And some of that's been fixed today in Business Central, the latest version. So just kind of reviewing their processes at a re-implementation is going to be key, because you, as a partner, if you're not doing that, you're doing your client a disservice at the end of the day.
100%. And it's so important to just not dump your data. Make sure you're evaluating. And I think evaluating frequently is important. Maybe once a year, you're going back and saying, did we add a new product line? Is that going well? Process improvement is so key after you go live to make sure you're doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah. Doing those health checkups is what I call them, but making sure you're staying in constant contact after your client goes live, because there's a lot of things that you can't train per se, like efficiency things, shortcuts, even like keyboard shortcuts, prior to them going live, because it's just not going to stick. But if you can get those users into the system and then show them after the fact, it's going to stick, and then they're going to thank you for it as well.
Yep, 100%. Everyone's got to be agile and pivot. Well, awesome. This has been a great couple of tips and tricks. I know we could probably go forever, but now we'll turn it over to the chat and answer some questions that people are having. And thank you everyone for joining our session. Don't forget to register for the DynamicsCon Live, and excited to see you all this year.